Welcome to this information event for parents and supporters of students starting at or returning to Leeds Beckett University this September. You can submit your questions throughout the event using the Q&A panel in Teams. I am delighted to introduce Professor Peter Slee, University Vice-Chancellor, to open the event.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Leeds Beckett University and thank you for joining us this evening. On behalf of us all here today, I hope that wherever you are, you and your loved ones are safe and well. During the global pandemic, we at Leeds Beckett University have adopted 3 principles to guide us in these very uncertain times. And I want to share these with you now because these are the principles that will determine how we support our students when they join us or rejoin us later this month. Our first principle is that we will play a full and active role in the national effort to mitigate the spread of the virus and therefore to protect the health and well-being of our own university community. The second principle is that we'll ensure that we uphold our educational standards and that we'll deliver the curriculum that we have promised to our students. Third, we'll maintain a full range of support services to our students so that they have access to the advice, guidance and the support that they need to succeed. Now, I'm joined today by senior colleagues who will share in more detail the steps that we're taking to deliver on these 3 important principles. But let me share with you now some of the important headlines. We are working in partnership with the City of Leeds Council and with the local public health authorities to keep our university and our city community as safe as we can. I'm a member of the city's COVID Control Board, and I chair the Joint University Standing Committee here in Leeds, which meets weekly to coordinate and review the safety measures that we have in place. We have followed national guidance and adopted best practice on social distancing, on people flows into and around our campus, on personal hygiene, sanitation and cleaning. We've adopted study and accommodation bubbles so that our students can socialise and make friends while reducing the risks which clearly can escalate when large groups meet indoors. We are providing a blended approach to the delivery of our curriculum. Much of our teaching will be delivered remotely and flexibly, and our face-to-face teaching will be in small groups and focus on practical and enrichment work. Our full range of student support is available to all of our students, and much of it is accessible online and out of work hours. We have to be flexible at the moment. We are ready, should the virus abate or should a vaccine be made widely available, to provide more face-to-face content to our students and to provide wider social opportunities. Equally, should the virus become more prevalent, then we're able to increase the range of our remote teaching if we need to. In either scenario, we will ensure that our students have the access to what they need to achieve their learning outcomes. It is important that our students understand their own personal responsibilities, both for their personal well-being and for the progress that they want to make in their studies. I hope that you will reinforce with them their need to observe the protocols that we've put in place to protect them and for them to follow their programme of study diligently. I think we all understand that these are challenging times for every part of our society. But this is a good time, in my view, for anyone to invest in their education so that they're ready to take advantage of the opportunities which will arise when this global health emergency subsides and when the economic recovery begins. Over the last 3 years, on average, 95% of our students were in work or further study within 6 months of graduating. According to the National Student Survey, our students here at Leeds Beckett University show some of the highest levels of satisfaction with their university experience of all English universities. We at Leeds Beckett University have worked tirelessly to make our campus ready for the safe return of our students, and I can assure you that a warm welcome awaits every one of them. I will now hand over to my colleagues, but I'll be pleased to answer any questions that you have later in this briefing. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Cardew. I'm Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic at Leeds Beckett University, and I'm very pleased to be able to talk to you this evening. Can we have this first slide, please? I wanted to talk to you about the way in which we're structuring our academic delivery in the coming year, with the following on from the emphasis that Peter has made in terms of our reliance on government advice in terms of keeping things safe, but also our desire to make the student experience here as realistic and live and exciting as possible. The first way we've done this is to respond to the uncertainties for the coming year by restructuring our academic year into 3 10-week blocks. These 10-week blocks allow us to teach less in each block, to have a more focused experience for students. They also allow us to adapt our approaches to teaching and learning as the year progresses and as we face the various changes that are undoubtedly going to come over that year. In the first 10-week block, certainly, we are planning to deliver the majority of what we do and in terms of content for students online, but supported through virtual and physical face-to-face meetings. Our principle is that where students can access things online, they should. There are some courses which require students to do practical work or lab work or to be involved in art studios and those kind of things, or dance and drama, those kind of things. And of course, in those circumstances, an online experience isn't desirable. But we're trying to make sure that we focus on those and keep them to a minimum. And those students who can and would normally have what we think of as standard classroom experience will be doing this through the safety of a screen. We're also looking at making sure that our students get to know one another. Having a group experience in higher education is incredibly important, and we want students to gel and bond together, particularly those of us who are joining us in their first year in the coming year, and that's a very important part of what we're trying to do. So students will receive support from tutors outside the formal classes, and they'll be able to liaise with each other and talk with each other in groups over the internet using our 2 core platforms, our Blackboard virtual learning environment, which we call My Beckett, and Microsoft Teams, which you're all liaising with us this evening using. We've also made sure we can keep as much as possible material online. We already have a library that is very much delivered through online materials, backed up, of course, by physical books. But we're increasing that as much as we can to make sure that students' reading lists are supported to the greatest extent. Have the next slide, please. So, excuse me, we're hoping that this will mean that students don't have an experience that is too dissimilar from what they would face in what we think of as a normal world and a normal year. They will, of course, access a lot of material online, but there'll be plenty of interaction. Tutors will be there to back up the delivery of material with questions and answer sessions and online tutorials and support. And we'll make sure, as I said, that specialist space and resources is prioritised so that those courses that rely on those have absolutely the best access to them. We've already moved to a world where all our assessments have been conducted online. We did that at the end of the last academic year, and this will continue. And on that basis, of course, we're keeping formal examinations to an absolute minimum. And we won't have them physically, but we will, in some courses where there's a professional body requirement, we'll have those conducted online and managed for students. Next slide, please. Our emphasis, as I said, is keeping people safe. It's no good being in a situation where things escalate and get out of control in terms of infection, and we must do everything we can to support all the measures in place to minimise that. We're doing this, I said, by limiting the amount of face-to-face contact to the absolute minimum, but we're also doing it by making sure that we schedule things correctly and that we know about the movement of students in and out of buildings. We've created thoroughfares and entry and exit routes to make sure that we can manage the flow of people across our campuses and through our buildings. The movement of students into smaller groups will help also by forming what is becoming known to schools now as study bubbles, where you get a defined group of students working closely together so that they have an ability to monitor and track and trace their own exposure to infection, and also, of course, limit the impact of it should anything unforeseen arise. Next slide, please. And the final bit of this really is being responsive. We're trying to maintain a balance between consistency and flexibility. So the 3 10-week blocks I talked about at the beginning will stay stable during the 10 weeks of study, but as though the first 10 weeks is being delivered, we'll be reviewing what the next 10 look like, and we are able to respond then to anything that should happen. This will be particularly important should we face a major restriction on movement over the coming period, because that would have an impact, of course, on practical work and placements and things like that. And we know that we can reschedule those towards the end of the year should we had to. This year, when everything emerged rather more suddenly than we'd like to have done, we were able to respond to that by extending the year, by giving students extensions on their work, by making sure assessment was handled in a slightly more lengthy fashion, and by adapting our academic regulations to support students and make sure that the immediate impact of the crisis didn't have a detrimental effect on them. We have those measures ready. We can implement them as and when we need to, should the situation develop. So we'll continue to keep an eye on things. We'll continue to talk to our students and our Students' Union. You'll hear from Barbara Pereira from our Students' Union later about some of that. But we will make sure that everyone is up to speed with what's planned, and that we don't do anything in a precipitate or hurried way, and everything is supported by a good rationale and able to be delivered in as smooth a manner as possible. We hope that in that way we can get through the year smoothly. There's a long way to go yet, and I think we all think of next year as being a slightly uncertain landscape, but we think we're in the best possible place to deal with that. We've prepared for it, we can respond to it, and we know that we can support our students to successful outcomes over the course of the year. Thank you very much. I'll hand on now.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jo Norrie. I'm going to talk to you a bit about our support service and resources for our students, and about how we've adapted and enhanced these this year to deal with this new situation. I'm going to cover student services and wellbeing, libraries, IT support, learning technology, and the development of those all-important academic skills which will enable students to succeed as they move into higher education study. So the first thing I'm going to mention is the Student Advice Hub. This is our first port of call for students to ask questions about the university. It's staffed by experienced advisors who can give advice and guidance, or provide a gateway and an introduction to some of our specialist services, some of which I'll talk about next. As with many of our services this year, we're operating primarily online,
The service will be available via video calls, online chat, and there'll be online resources and telephone. And I think we're talking about online a lot this evening. I think I just want to say that this is still a personal one-to-one experience. These are well-established channels that many of our students like to use those, and we'll always ask students how they would like to be contacted. So one of those specialist services is the very important wellbeing and mental health support. This is staffed by advisors, mental health practitioners and counsellors, and we offer triage and one-to-one appointments according to need, which again will be available via telephone, online, video call this year. And we also have available Kooth Student, which is an online counselling and wellbeing platform available 7 days a week. We introduced that last year before COVID, and it's been quite a popular resource that students have found helpful, and we're continuing that throughout this year. We also have the Student Money Advice Service, which provides advice about student funding, benefits, budgeting and any debt problems, and that's staffed by accredited student money advisors. Where students are struggling financially, they can apply to the University Hardship Fund, and we've made more money available to that fund this year. We're aware that COVID might bring more financial difficulties to our students. That is a means-tested fund, but again, the Student Money Advice team advise and support students with that. And then introduced for the first time this year is what we're calling the Digital Access Fund. So where students may not have the means themselves to afford to buy a laptop, we're making a dedicated investment into resources so that they will be able to buy a laptop through one of our suppliers. With more online both engagement and teaching this year, then a laptop will really be vital. And then lastly on that list, there's also the Leeds University chaplaincy, so all of the universities in Leeds, and that is another support, an independent, confidential support for students who may wish to talk to somebody outside of the university. For any students who have a disability, whether that's a physical disability or something like dyslexia, the Disability Advice Team work on a one-to-one basis to advise and assess those students so that we can provide appropriate support, adjustments, equipment, perhaps specialist study skills and mentoring to help them engage with their course and their university life. It's important that students register with the Disability Advice Team, and if they've indicated a disability in their application to the university, they will have had contact already from that team. But if they haven't done that or haven't yet responded to that, there is still time to do that before the academic year starts. Our team in student services will be the main interface with students should they have any symptoms or any cases of COVID. And as the Vice-Chancellor has said, we're working closely with Public Health England and Leeds City Council on the overall response in the region. So that will be a direct contact and interface with our students, and equally to support NHS test and trace. And we do have a local testing facility nearby. And lastly, in this section, if you do have a concern about your students' well-being, we would very much want you to contact us, and we promise that we will always act on that. The vast majority of our students are 18 years old or over, and therefore adults, which means that we do need their express permission to share information about them with you. However, should ever a very serious situation arise in which it would be appropriate, we do have an emergency contact for all of our students. Next slide, please. In terms of the library and academic skills and technology, we have an integrated service based in the library, both physically and virtually. The libraries themselves will be open this year, 12 hours a day, but we provide 24/7 support through online chat, telephone, and online other channels that we have about library, IT, learning technology and academic skills. So students have one interface to come into there. If students want to come into the library to study, they will need to make a booking, and we've laid out the libraries in a way now that they're suitably spaced out, so those bookings will be important. But I think it's students have been asking a lot about the getting physically into the library, so that's important too. If they just want to borrow a book, we've started up a click and collect service already that they can request that online and then make an appointment to come and collect the particular book. But many of the resources that our students use are ebooks, e-journals and databases. About 80 to 85% of the resources in any case are digital, and we've invested more this year to make sure that we have as many ebooks as possible to support all of our reading lists. Our Skills for Learning service that supports students with their academic writing, maths and stats skills is available online also. They'll be doing webinars and one-to-one tutorials, which they can do online as well as the integrated resources within the virtual learning environment. And there are two particular modules that I would mention. We have Study Ready. New students will already have had a link to look at the Study Ready module. That's an introduction before arrival at university on what higher education study is about, and a bit of a taster of some of the types of activities and the technologies that they'll be using. And then this year, for the first time, we have Study Smart. That is a module that is a kind of introduction and induction once they arrive at campus, with many different sorts of activity to provide online induction. Through this team as well, we provide the My Beckett virtual learning environment, which Phil mentioned. That's our online platform for each module, which is for delivery of content, teaching and learning activities and collaboration and discussion boards and reading lists. And as soon as students enroll, they're through to that, be able to see their modules and reading lists and some of those. And that's also the platform that's a gateway to many other of our online resources and skills courses. We're also using this year more heavily Microsoft Teams, Collaborate Digital Classroom, and we already have online assignment submission tools. Last slide, please. So I thought it would be useful just to mention a few things which students, and perhaps you can help them with this, could do before arriving at the university or perhaps just on arrival. The first is to log on to the online welcome website. Hopefully new students are already doing this, but that provides the gateway to enrolment and to many of the resources that we're talking about today. On arrival in Leeds, those who are new to the area should register with the Leeds Student Medical Practice, so the local GP practice, and again we provide support for them to do that. Through enrolment, we are asking students if they fall into the categories of clinically vulnerable or extremely clinically vulnerable due to health conditions, and in those cases we'll be able to target information to them, and if they're extremely clinically vulnerable, then they will have a dedicated contact in the student services team. Students with a disability, as I've mentioned, should register with the disability advice team. And it is worth check again before setting off for university that vaccinations are up to date. So I'm thinking of things like meningitis vaccinations, mumps vaccinations. Again, more information on our web pages for this. Hopefully have a look at the Study Ready online module. And if you're thinking about technology and by purchasing a laptop, up to now we provide some information on the website about our recommended specifications, but please don't buy Microsoft Office because all students have a free copy of that extensive software suite. And then lastly, I think have that discussion with your student about what should happen if they have symptoms, the importance of them reporting them, of booking a test and responding to any contact tracing or self-isolation that is necessary. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'll now pass on to my colleague Victoria.
Thank you, Jo. Good evening. I have responsibility for campus and residential services here at Leeds Beckett University. We have been working carefully following government guidance and advice to ensure that our residences and campuses are fully prepared and safe for the beginning of term. I'm going to talk today about our accommodation and campus, about the measures that we have put into place. We work with multiple partners to provide accommodation and have a number of properties within our accommodation portfolio. Move-in has actually commenced at some properties and will continue over the next 3 weeks. We understand that our students each have unique circumstances and therefore are taking a flexible approach. If students are unable to move in at the commencement of the tenancy, we recommend that they contact the accommodation office at Leeds Beckett and our team will be able to talk through suitable options. Should students require an early arrival, a simple online request form can be completed and arrangements can easily be made. Equally, for any students requiring quarantine on arrival, we have separate accommodation allocated. We will provide guidance and advice for students who are required to quarantine, including details of support and packages that may be required during this period. In the event of any of our students needing to self-isolate during the tenancy period, we will communicate guidance, advice and support to cover all eventualities, such as supply of food, groceries and medication. Our ResLife advisors work within our accommodation team and along with our site management provide valuable support to all our residents. They are available 24/7. Our ResLife advisors should be the first port of call for support within residences and are there specifically to support our students. Move-in has commenced at some properties and students are required to book a convenient time slot via an online form. The move-in process will be contactless and the implementation and adherence to allocated time slot will ensure safe distancing can be maintained. At the point of move-in to student accommodation and living in one flat, you will become a household with your flatmates, and as such, government guidance relating to households should be followed. Next slide, please. Please don't underestimate our recognition that for many of our students, moving in to live with new people can be daunting. The additional concerns created by COVID in some instances can intensify these feelings. We have created a Halls Charter, a set of principles and expected behaviours to create a culture of mutual support and inclusion. Our Halls Charter has been developed with our partners to ensure consistency across our accommodation portfolio. Next slide, please. Our charter sets out 6 principles that students moving in can expect. Our first principle is putting student safety first. We have implemented and we will continue to implement the latest government guidance to create a COVID secure living environment. Our principle 2, we will be there to help students when they need it. Our ResLife team and our on-site team are there to look after our well-being and welfare and safety of our students. They are available online, over the phone and face-to-face. Our third principle is that we will provide a clean and hygienic living environment. We have installed hand sanitizer stations and enhanced our cleaning regimes throughout the common areas. We've installed protective screens and signage to set out safe social distances. We will also provide guidance and advice to residents to support them to maintain clean and hygienic environments within their flats. We will provide safe places for our students to socialise. We will be led by government guidance. Our communal areas such as bars, lounges and study spaces will be opened within residences, with measures in place to ensure compliance with social distancing. We will provide our students in residences with clear communication. We will share COVID guidance and advice to residents to maintain a safe environment. And our final principle is that we will support and encourage our residents to keep connected. We will provide opportunities for our students to encourage and support them to make new friends and to socialise in a safe and enjoyable way. This covers the principles that students can expect from the university. Next slide, please. There are equally 4 key principles that we ask our students within residences to expect from each other. Our first principle is to ensure the safety of the community. We ask that our students recognise that they have a personal responsibility to protect the safety of all students, staff and the local community, and should follow all the measures in place to minimise the spread of the virus. We ask our students to follow COVID guidance. We ask our students and residents to follow the latest guidance from the university and from the government. We ask that anybody experiencing symptoms report these to the university, self-isolates, gets a test and speaks to the NHS. We expect our residents to respect one another, to treat flatmates with respect, to share communal spaces safely, and to communicate with one another to resolve issues and to take personal responsibility. And finally, we expect our students within residences to take responsibility for any guests or permitted visitors on site. Our Halls Charter aims to provide a clear framework of expectations and measures in place to produce a safe environment for our students. Next slide, please. Across our campus, we have put a number of measures into place to provide a safe environment for our students when they study on campus. We have implemented a zoning approach for our schools, creating dedicated space for teaching by each school, creating study bubbles. We have reduced class sizes and planned classroom layouts to ensure 2-metre social distancing. We've implemented one-way routes, installed clear signage across our estate. We've installed hundreds of hand sanitizer points, installed additional hand wash sinks and enhanced cleaning regimes across the university. We will be distributing face coverings to all our staff and students with an expectation that these will be worn in public areas. We have appointed a number of ambassadors from the beginning of term to support our students navigating around campus, to remind students to comply with social distancing. Our campus has been adapted to ensure we have a safe environment for our students to study in, so it does look like slightly different. Next slide, please. The majority of services across campus will be open, including our coffee bars, retail outlets. Our full vending provision is in operation, as are our cash points at each site. We have adapted our campus, our halls and services to ensure that we are providing a safe study environment for our students. We are confident that by working together with our students, we will provide a great Leeds Beckett experience. I will now hand you over to my colleague, Barbara. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Barbara Pereira. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Union Affairs Officer at the Leeds Beckett Students' Union. Next slide, please, Catherine. So I imagine there will be very different levels of understanding on what the Students' Union does in the room here today. So hopefully this will clear up some of your initial questions. We are a non-for-profit organisation that exists separately from the university, and our mission is about making students' lives better. We do this through a bunch of different ways and through a mix of students and staff team to support students at all levels. We represent student voices and interests. We offer opportunities to meet new people, to develop lifelong skills, to volunteer in the local community, and also to offer support and advice through our independent and non-judgmental free advice service for students. Next slide, please. So when it comes to representation, I'm one part of the 5 full-time elected student officers. There are 5 of us in total, and each of us hold different areas of responsibility, and you will start seeing their face in the coming weeks in communications. We have an education officer, Sherry, who lobbies for students' academic experience at the highest level of the university. We have an activities officer called Anna, who has been elected to be a big part of running our events programme and works to support societies and freshers. We have a welfare and community officer called Pango, whose remit is all around working on tackling wellbeing issues, campaigns and on student housing, and an equality and diversity officer called Kay, who is currently working on supporting our equality groups, such as the LGBT plus group of students and BAME students, and also works with the university to influence campaigns and creating our own. And then there's me, like I said earlier, I am the Union Affairs Officer, and I dabble into a lot of different things, including student rights, national campaigns, community coercion work with the university, and the overall student experience. Next slide. So societies, I imagine that a lot of students are worried about the academic experience, but on top of that also the anxiety that comes with coming onto campus and also working online and the difficulty that they think it might be in meeting new people. So I am here to reassure you that there are still going to be lots of opportunities to meet new people regardless of this new world. Societies are a really key place to meet new people when you come to university. It's a place to find like-minded people that share a same hobby. It could be something like gaming, or it could be that students want to connect with people of the same culture or faith. And we also work with the university for students to have the opportunity to connect socially with people on their course. And we do that through something called course-based societies, which we run in collaboration. And we are currently adapting on how that will look online. And as one of my colleagues said earlier, it will be on Teams, the course-based societies, but all the others will be a mixture of different ways. Societies are student-led and are supported by a great team of staff that we have at the SU, who work all year round to help the elected leaders of these societies to host events, apply for funding grants, and to improve the overall offering of the society and their aims that they set out each year. And if there ever is a society that a student wish they could join and it doesn't currently exist, we do encourage them to reach out to us, and we will support them in creating that society and finding people that also want to come together and build that community of students. And you can find a list of all the ones we currently offer on our website at leedsbeckett.su.co.uk/societies, and I'm sure someone will put that in the Q&A for us. And remember that actually a lot of students will be talking to you saying they are really concerned about meeting new people, but I think we just need to all remind ourselves that actually students will be joining these next coming weeks, and they will all be feeling the same way, that these anxieties about trying to meet new people, and actually we need to encourage them to putting themselves out there and joining societies, even if it's just to try it out. They are a mix of different prices. Some of them are free, some of them are less than £5. We have a go-karting one that's a little bit higher, so there really is something for everyone. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the community, our job at the SU is to develop community-based initiatives that tackle issues that affect students in the community. We work with different partners across Leeds, so the university is a major one, and we work with a local housing charity called Unipol, and essentially we provide a voice for students in meetings with the local council and resident associations. So students do add a lot to the community, and one of the ways that they can do that is through our volunteering offering. So we currently work with about 200 partners in local Leeds, and we ensure that these opportunities that they can get involved in are safe and student friendly. A lot of courses ask for students or require for students to complete a volunteering module, and our staff, which is actually pictured there, Sophie, she can support students in finding an appropriate volunteering opportunity to do that with. And we also support the development of student-led projects. So we have an allotment based in Hyde Park, if you know Leeds, which is quite a good opportunity as well for students to go on a Sunday morning and meet people there. Next slide, please. So our advice service is honestly one of the best things about the SU. I know it sounds a little bit boring, but I imagine for everyone watching this is very important as well. So our advice service is completely independent from the university. Like I said earlier, we are a non-for-profit organisation, and the students can come to us for a range of different issues: academic, housing and money issues. So in terms of the financial hardship side of things, for example, which I know has been mentioned earlier, a student could come to us and ask for support on how to access the different financial hardship services, for example, both in the university and externally. So we do recommend that students do come to us as a first point of call to access different services and for us to signpost them on, as well as give them our opinion on how they should proceed with any of their issues. So please do pass that information on to them, that we are always readily available online and hopefully in person eventually. Next slide, please. So the Hive is our social space on each campus. This photo was taken last year, so it will look a little bit different now with social distancing measures in place, of course. We have now developed an app, so all food and drink will be ordered through the app, so students can go to their lessons, pre-order whilst they're leaving, or should I say sat in their lessons, and come and just collect their food if they wish. Likewise, they are able to sit down in our spaces if there is seating available, and we have a range of different menus. We have a vegan menu, we have lots of vegetarian options, halal options there, gluten-free options as well. So it really is a very good place to come in a student-friendly environment to come and get some food, whether it's on the go or just to sit down quickly and have a bite. Next one, please. So freshers, which I've seen a lot of in the Q&A. So we have got an extensive list of events for freshers. We will be hosting an in-person freshers fair at the Headingley campus, and that will be on a time slot basis. So students will need to book on the website and obviously follow test and trace guidelines and just make sure they fill those forms out. We will also be, we've also collaborated, with the Leeds Beckett Sport Department, and we've got some free daily fitness classes online for any student to get involved in, freshers or not, and that will be really exciting, I think, as well as some cooking classes, a virtual escape room, and what else have we got on there? And then there's also some in-person events that are run by one of our partners, Voodoo. So there's some brunches on Sunday afternoons or social distance in local Leeds at different venues. So there will be things for everyone to get involved in. It really just is a matter of you figuring out what it is you want to pursue, what society it is you want to get involved in. Do you want to get involved in volunteering? So it really is going to be a great year, I think. Next slide. And that is it. So that is a Q&A coming up now. So thank you all for listening to me, and I hope that's been very useful. Cheers.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Barbara. Right, that brings us to the Q&A part of the event. We'll try to answer as many as possible that will relate to as many of the questions as possible as well. Thanks to everyone that submitted questions, and just a reminder for the speakers to have the microphones on ready to answer as well. We'll start with Vice Chancellor Peter Slee, if that's all right, Peter. There's been lots of talk in the media recently about Leeds being on the watch list and people worried about local lockdowns. Essentially, what steps would the university take in that situation? And also, crucially, will the new rules from Monday affect things, the kind of the 6 people limits?
Thanks, Will. Yes, Leeds is on a watch list and receiving enhanced support from the government for testing and tracing and tracking of people who've tested positive for COVID. A lockdown isn't planned. There are another 2 or 3 stages of viral transmission to go through before that would ever be considered. And even in the context of a lockdown, what the Prime Minister said yesterday is that education has to be prioritised. So schools, universities, colleges will remain open for as long as possible should the UK face any kind of significant second spike. So I think the chances within Leeds, or indeed any other city, of a university being in lockdown is very, very remote indeed. We have the safety precautions, some of which you've heard about this evening, in place to limit the spread within our institution through study and accommodation bubbles and the safety and health protocols that we've put in place. So I think you know, the whole of the UK is on alert at the moment, but I think the steps that have just been introduced will help to calm things down a little. In terms of limiting groups of who can gather together indoors to 6 or less, that doesn't apply to education settings, but it does apply to accommodation settings. So what it would mean is in a flat or a household where there are 4 students or 6 students, then another 4 or 6 can't come and join them for a party. And that's again to limit the chances of anyone who's asymptomatic and carrying COVID passing it on to other people. So I think from that perspective, I mean, every university will be in the same position all the way through the UK. That's a very sensible measure to put in place.
Great, that's really useful. Thanks, Peter. And another very kind of contemporary issue is there's lots in the news today about other universities that have been involved in these large-scale testing projects. Has Beckett got any plans to do the same? No,
the advice of the Director of Public Health here in Leeds is that young people being tested en masse, particularly when so many are asymptomatic, could lead to a lot of false positive results with, you know, inconvenient knock-on effects for the individuals concerned. So the key in Leeds is access to rapid testing quickly. We have established, in conjunction with the University of Leeds, a testing centre on the University of Leeds campus, which is Public Health England funded. Our students and students at the other universities will have access to that testing site so that if anyone does begin to feel ill, they can be tested quickly, effectively and safely there. Brilliant. Thanks, Peter. And a final one for you, if that's all right. I guess it's lots of questions in the chat about, I guess, the kind of value of the university this year, particularly with a lot of the teaching going online. So I guess, is it sensible to move to Leeds and to be part of our community in Leeds if a lot of the teaching is now online? I think it's a personal decision for everybody. It's not for me to say how people might choose to act in that situation. But I incline much more to Barbara's view that she expressed, that, you know, we still have a community of people here. Students who come to Leeds will still be meeting with other students in learning situations, albeit in smaller groups than we would have liked. There is still the opportunity to engage in clubs and societies and to take part in sport with the necessary restrictions to protect people's health in place. I hope too that you know, we can see a reduction in transmission across the UK. And perhaps over the course of the year, we may see some relaxing of some of the rules and regulations that are put in place to protect people's health. Fantastic. Thanks very much, Peter. The next one's for Professor Phil Cardew, if that's all right. There have been lots of questions, Phil, about the kind of balance of face-to-face teaching and online teaching. And yeah, a few queries about what students will receive online. And I know this is different across all of our 140, 150 courses plus, but can you give a bit of a steer on the kinds of things that will be face-to-face and the kinds of things that will be online, at least for the first part of the year?
Thank you, Will. Yes, absolutely. And I think it's firstly, it's very important to differentiate the kinds of online experiences we're talking about. There are some online experiences which are purely passive. You watch a film, and some students' experiences will contain that kind of interaction. There will be colleagues are trying as much as they're possible to split what they would have done through lectures up into meaningful chunks for students, to give them the ability to access information in as regularized and happy a way as possible. However, that is very much not the entirety of the online experience. A lot of online experience is doing what we're doing now. It's talking to human beings just over a screen rather than face to face in the classroom. And to be honest, we're all getting used to that now, I think. It's going to seem a little strange going into rooms and actually talking to people in a few months' time. And so I think, you know, the interaction that's possible there, and some of the stories we've had back from colleagues who've been teaching, who have said, you know, some of their quieter students actually get on a lot better because they don't feel so overawed by the pressure of other colleagues in the room. They're able to speak up more. Maybe they shove a question in the chat function and get it answered that way, and then if you pluck up courage to speak after that. And I think that is a kind of positive side. And of course, we will try our best to manage that so that we're in as smaller groups as possible. In addition to that, I know all of my academic colleagues are itching to get into rooms and teach students. That's what they love doing. So you can be assured that any opportunity any of them have within the restrictions that we have and keeping people as safe as possible, that there'll be opportunities to do that. And finally, I shouldn't go back to what I think is probably the most important bit of university you don't realise when you're there, which is talking to other students. I think sometimes students rely too much on the notion that staff are the only people who ever give them decent information, but other students are incredibly valuable. And again, I think the ability you have to form into virtual groups online and the chat functions that we have, and the way that we'll be able to, in many ways, continue the learning experience at whatever time the students want to continue it, which I think is the joy of a virtual environment. If you have something that gets in the way during the day, then you can pick it up later. And we are certainly ensuring in everything we do that there's a balance between what we would term synchronous and asynchronous activities. So there will be some things as a timetable and scheduled, and you'll be asked to turn up to them. However, if you can't, they'll be available in another way for you later. Or if you want to go back and have another look, very much like what we're doing now, which is going to be available for people to look at later on in the evening and other times during the week. And I think that again is a really important aspect. So the online experience isn't just sitting there watching telly. There's a lot of interactivity to it. There's a lot of engagement in it. It's up to us to make it as interesting as possible. I know colleagues are thinking of a lot of ways of doing that, and the tools we have at our disposal are becoming more sophisticated as we speak. A lot of things being rolled out now which are new and allow for even better interaction. So I do think people can have a really good time if they put their mind to just the fact that it's a slightly different environment.
Great, thanks, Phil. And leading on quite nicely from that, really, we've had a few questions about. I asked Peter about the kind of the social value of university, but yeah, some very straightforward questions about the monetary value of university now and our student fees. So essentially, why should students be paying full price this year for the kind of university experience? Can we ensure an equivalent experience at university? And quite briefly, if you will, with your answer.
That's for me again.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes, because I think it's a difficult thing to express as an exchange of money for services, but what you're getting when you come to university, first and foremost, is the degree. And the degree won't change. The degree will still be there at the end of the day, and the value that has in the marketplace. You're also getting the benefit of interaction with a huge number of very wise people. Some of them are some are even tutors. But your academic colleagues, your staff, your students, the university life generally, the environment that you're in. A lot of that doesn't change by whether it's physical or not. The minds and the hearts and the voices and the eyes and the temperaments are still there. So I think in every respect we will endeavour to give students as live an experience as we possibly can. Great,
thank you. Next question's for Jan Daly, if that's all right, Jan. We know that a lot of kind of student support issues that crop up are often kind of come more organically through conversations with the lecturers, or people coming in late to lectures or late to seminars. And I think a lot of parents are now concerned that it's more difficult to pick up those kind of well-being issues. So it'd be useful to hear from you about how the university is trying to counter that and make sure that all the students are as well as possible throughout the time studying with us.
Okay, certainly. Thank you, Will. Yes, recognise that will be a concern for people, but I hope it will be assuring that we have been operating since lockdown in March in a largely online provision of student support services, and that's from counselling, mental health support, chaplaincy, disability support, and we have found, actually, as some of my colleagues have said earlier, that some students are more comfortable coming forward for support when they can do that through the medium of perhaps a chat mechanism or through email. We haven't found any issues at all really with students coming forward, and the engagement that we've had has actually been greater with some students, including international students, students who are quieter, students with a disability. They can be actually more comfortable. Equally, we have channels, really effective channels for staff who have found their way quite easily through to the support services. So I feel really confident that as we've been doing it for 6 months in this way, that students' issues will be picked up and responded to really appropriately.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Jan. Got a couple of questions about accommodation, if that's right, for Victoria. Firstly, I think a lot of people still wanted some clarity on the rules about isolating in accommodation. So if someone within the accommodation bubble tests positive, where do we go from there?
Okay, thank you, Will. Within accommodation, the minute that a group of students move in to a flat, then they will become a household. So the same rules regarding self-isolation will apply to that one individual household. So a flat of 6 people, for example, they would become a household and they would be asked to isolate together. It would only be in the event of a number of cases when the PHE would make a decision that there may be a number of households that would be required to isolate.
Okay.
Thank you
very much. That's really useful. Another question that people had, that the other end of the, well, maybe not at the other end of the practicality scale, but a much more emotional scale, is about dropping off. So I know that's a very important moment in people's lives, and maybe a bit of a rite of passage. Is it okay for both parents to drop their children off at university at the accommodation, or is it different in different accommodation providers?
Okay, I appreciate this is a really big moment for a lot of people. As I mentioned earlier, we work with a number of partners to provide accommodation, and the property makeup is quite different across the spectrum. What will happen is that you will receive, or student will receive, confirmation that they've booked a slot for their accommodation, and attached to that confirmation are details regarding the specifications for the particular site where the student is going. Unfortunately, there are some restrictions in place at some sites, so it is important that people read the information carefully. Obviously, we want to make sure that moving is safe, and we want to make sure that we are able to apply social distancing, and therefore, unfortunately, we have had to restrict the number of people who can move people into accommodation in some properties.
Great, thanks very much, Victoria. Next question is for Barbara, if that's all right. And again, we want to finish at 7 if possible, so keep this relatively brief. But there are a few questions really about how students are going to potentially spend their time over the weeks leading up to teaching starting. There was one question even that said, will my child be bored when they're come to university? You listed a few things, but what's your take on that? Like, how do you recommend students making the most of their first couple of weeks at university if a lot of things are being done online?
Thank you for that question. I honestly think, like people have said already, I think in some ways this makes it easier for people to engage. I know that freshers is always a tricky time for students anyway. It's hard putting yourself out there, but I think we all just need to encourage students to really put themselves out there in the sense of click on a society, see if it's interesting, go to the free meetup if you can, if the social distancing allows it and government guidelines allows it. And I think just really putting yourself out there and going on Teams and adding yourself to groups as well, and just starting the conversations. I think this won't be as lonely as everyone thinks it will. I really don't think it will. I'm here to give you all hope that actually the Students' Union, we've seen an increase in people getting involved online. We've seen an increase in people volunteering online as well. Who knew that was a thing? There's loads of apps now that we've partnered with and that do things like that. So I think students can still do a lot, and there is a lot of offering across the board, both from the Students' Union and the university, and local businesses as well, to be honest. So I think it will be a good year ahead. I really do.
What a nice way to finish. Thanks very much, Barbara. So yeah, that does bring us right on the button of 7 o'clock. Brings an end to the event this evening. I can see we've had dozens and dozens of questions within the chat. I've tried to ask the questions that might be most appropriate to the most number of people, as it were. I know we won't have covered everything. We'll continue to answer the questions for a little while in the chat. And it's also worth checking our FAQs on the COVID information page on our website as well. So I'd like to thank our presenters and panel members for their contributions. I know they've helped paint a really clear picture for me as to what it will be like being a student in the coming academic year. But more importantly, thank you as parents and supporters of our current and future students as well. Thanks for asking the questions that you've asked. If you've asked the question, we know that other people will be thinking the same questions too, so thank you for that. And whatever the world looks like, we'll look forward to giving you a very, very warm welcome to Leeds Beckett as soon as we can. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks.